Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Tablas Creek Instagram live broadcast for this first week of September. This is normally a time where I tell you about how everything is starting off with harvest. But instead, this is a year where we haven't even started yet. So I'll tell you a little bit about how we're prepping for things, share a few pictures of what things look like in the vineyard. And then I am super excited to invite Clive Pursehouse to talk. He is the U.S. editor for venerable Decanter magazine, which is based in the UK, but making a real push to expand their focus on the United States. And he has a really interesting background. So I can't wait for you to meet Clive. But while we are waiting for people to join, I am going to share a few pictures of what is going on out in the vineyard. So as I mentioned, we're late this year, and that means that we are still waiting for a lot of grapes to go through veraison. This is Grenache. Normally, you would think at this time of year Grenache would be fully red, maybe not quite picked yet, but it's still almost as much green as it is red. There are grapes that are further along in that process. We have some Syrah. This is kind of an absolutely stereotypical, prototypical Syrah cluster. It's looking good, but not ripe yet. I was out there tasting, and it's still only like a little sweeter than table grapes. And if you look at the seeds, they're still almost entirely green. And that's just a sign that things are not physiologically ready yet. So instead of picking, what we are instead doing is getting ready. We've got all of our bins washed and stacked in our parking lot. We are cleaning barrels. All of these are barrels that have been set down. We're steam cleaning them, making sure that they're ready to go for our white fermentations. We are finishing up the last little odds and ends of our bottlings. We're waxing the magnums that we bottled last month. And yeah, basically just doing what we can to get ready. In the vineyard, we are going through and dropping some fruit. Dropping some of the things that we think aren't going to make it to help even up ripening on the things that are still there. And hopefully we'll start picking in maybe a week, 10 days. Okay, I'm going to share one more thing because I think this is a pretty dramatic, the difference between this year and last year. So I took a video of last year's harvest chalkboard and look at where we were at this time last year. So yeah, as we speak, we were halfway done with last year's harvest on the 6th of September last year. And this year, haven't started yet. Okay, that said, things look good. We're not discouraged at all. It's just a throwback to what we would have expected 15 years ago. Okay, I am going to invite Clive to join. As straightforward as it was when we did our test. So send through. Okay. Perfect. I see a space for Clive, but I don't see Clive. I don't see you. I hear you, but I don't see you. Okay, wait. There we go. I just saw a picture.
Can you see me now? No.
Nope. Still black.
I can see you. This is like the reverse of what happened last time.
It's totally the reverse of what happened last time.
Oh wait, I got it figured out. There we are.
Perfect. Excellent.
Yeah, it was the camera was looking at the black thing behind the phone. So not the most tech savvy, Jason. I'm kind of an analog guy for sure.
All this technology is amazing when it works.
You are very, very clearly very handy with all the stuff you were doing, the videos and all the harvest. That was really interesting stuff to see.
Yeah. I've always hated the beginning of live conversations or live broadcasts where people are like, okay, we're going to wait for people to join. Okay, it's good. We'll start in a minute. Okay, we'll start in 2 minutes. So I figured, how do I fill that space? And
right.
I started these back in the early days of the pandemic when, all of the normal ways that we had to communicate what we were doing had disappeared, and we had to figure out how to
how to make people still feel like they were a part of this world. So
Yeah.
like things I never thought I would be doing, like chuck this one up onto that list.
Right. Yeah. But I think
cool.
Stuff is easy, right? Like people want to hear about that.
Right. Exactly. And I mean, there's so much visual stuff that's valuable and exciting and interesting for people to see at wineries, but at the same time, it's like you got to get people there. You got to either get people into the vineyard or figure out some way to bring the vineyard to them.
Right.
Cool. Okay. So, I like to start by asking wine writers, which came first for them, the interest in writing or the interest in wine?
Yeah. Well, I guess probably in my specific case, in a sort of convoluted way, it would have been the wine. But I have a master's degree in philosophy, and so I've done a lot of writing, a lot of writing academically. So, but specific to what I'm doing now and what I was doing even prior with Peloton magazine is, so I had a job at the University of Washington for a long time. You mentioned that in your LinkedIn note, and I was at a conference in Yakima, Washington for student housing. I was involved with student housing, and I still have it, where if you bought wine from an urban winery in the proper town in the city of Yakima and you went to a restaurant, there was no corkage. So I was at a winery tasting room. I bought a couple bottles and then went to this meeting, and I took the wine with me, and we opened it, and there was a guy there he worked at Oregon State University, and he had a wine blog in Oregon, and he was interested in having any person write about Washington for him. And so that I was like, yeah, I'll give that a shot. I've never done anything like that before. So that's really technically, in this case, it was wine first before the writing.
Cool. And so I think maybe at least sort of, I assumed when I first heard your name and heard your new position with Decanter as the U.S. editor.
That I was British. You assumed I was British?
I did.
Because of my name. Yeah.
And I did a little research and you're a working class kid from Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Was wine on your family table
Never.
growing up at all?
Not at all. Yeah, so how I got into wine was when I moved to Seattle. My boss was a guy named Chris Yaney. He was taking some wine classes at the Seattle Community College. I think they were more appreciation classes than winemaking classes. And he sort of kind of fancying himself a wine aficionado. And he had purchased me a value price bottle of a wine by a winery that's no longer in business called Sagelands. Is that me? That sound?
You sound good to me.
Okay, great. I'm picking up something, but it just might be on my end. So he gave me this wine bottle. I opened it at dinner with my now wife, then girlfriend, and it was good. I was like, neither of us, she grew up in rural Pennsylvania. I grew up in the city of Pittsburgh, and it was like not a wine thing at all. And I was like, there's something to this wine tasting, and this is good. I like it. And so rented a car and drove over to Yakima maybe a month or so later and popped into a tasting room, and that's where it's sort of like I had my aha wine moment, where this woman in this tasting room tasted us on 3 different vintages of Merlot, and I was just fascinated by how different they were, and that was kind of the moment for me.
Super cool. And so what era was this? What year?
This would have been the very early aughts, so like 02, 03, maybe 04 at the latest.
And how long before that was it that you got recruited to write about Washington wines for that wine blog?
Maybe a year, maybe not even, if I'm remembering everything correctly. And then I was with this Oregon wine blog. I did that for a couple years or maybe a year, and then I started my blog. And at the time, like, blogs were sort of a thing. The big one here in the Northwest was Sean Sullivan's Washington Wine Report, and then I was kind of the second fiddle to him with this blog called the Northwest Wine Anthem, and covered Oregon and Washington. And did that for a good 8 years, and then I got involved with Peloton magazine. So maybe 8 years
Right.
is too long. Maybe it was more like 5. But
And so I want to ask you about the cycling and the Peloton magazine, but just so you basically wrote about wine for a while, but then there was a stretch where you weren't writing about wine, right? I mean, you were writing for Peloton and you were working for University of Washington, but not writing about wine.
Yeah, kind of. So the way I got involved at Peloton is they kind of took a chance on me. I raced bikes, and I was racing bikes back when I was still on Twitter, and Peloton had a really good presence on Twitter. And they did this thing in one of the magazines. I had a print subscription. If you were a USA Cycling member, you got a free digital subscription. And so I did that for a while, and then I got the print magazine. I apologize if you can hear the planes. Seattle really is Jet City. And they had this thing. It was like a little block, one column that said "Taste Spanish Wine," and it was a not really well formed sort of wine writing. And so I reached out to them on Twitter, and I was like, "Hey, if you're going to do something like this, you should let someone who knows a little bit about wine write or do the wine writing for you." And they just said no. They were like, no. And I wrote a story anyways, and I sent it to them. It was probably like 1,600 words, and it was about racing bikes and dirt and Pinot Noir from Oregon. And they were like, okay, actually, you've convinced us. And they had a mountain bike magazine for a while called Single Track. So that story was first published in Single Track magazine. I have it in the garage. I should have brought it up here just for nostalgia's sake. And then I started writing about food and wine and travel from a cycling lens. And then I started writing. So I was writing about wine tangentially, if not specifically. But it was for a cycling audience, and people would, maybe sort of even in your own thinking about that. But you have to think about cycling audiences. These are people who they sort of enjoy the finer things in life. Wine is certainly among that group. They have money, and they like to learn about new wine regions or unique, sort of wine-related experiences. So, but I also wrote about races. I interviewed, cyclists. I did gear reviews. I went to professional events and covered those as well. So it was a real melange of cycling and wine. And cycling is definitely my first love, if I had to choose between the two.
And you were a pretty serious racer for a while. Are you still racing?
Yeah, I mean, I was, as an amateur, strictly amateur. I'm a Cat 3 cyclocross racer. And yeah, I'm prepping for the season to start on Sunday here in the Pacific Northwest. And if this is too much with the planes, I can relocate inside. But this is what I live with every day. And these are noise canceling, so it should be a little better for you than it is for me. But yeah, the season starts Sunday. Great.
Noise planes, but I can hear you.
Okay.
So I'm not worried.
Because it's very, I can hear it. I can feel it in my chest. Yeah, so I've been training, trying to get into shape for the season. And I'm actually going to go this afternoon and tear around a park and on my cross bike for an hour and just try and go as hard as I can and get ready for Sunday. I don't have any, my best days are behind me. I think that's true about a lot of us, but I'll be 50 in a year and a month. So, yeah, I'm not going to win any races anymore. It's still a really good time. Not that I've only ever finished third was my best place, actually. Second. I finished second. In a mountain bike race, just a local one, for a funsy one. But yeah, I still do it.
Awesome. And I think people sometimes sort of romanticize the idea that the job of tasting wines and writing about wines, but like it can be pretty grueling. It's not a super healthy lifestyle a lot of times. Do you feel like the cycling piece of what you do is sort of the antidote to the wine piece in some ways?
Yeah, but I don't think it's sufficient. I thought it would be at first. I thought I could just do what I needed to do on the bike and and then go for sort of full bore. And I learned that pretty quickly over the spring that was a mistake. And so it's not a healthy lifestyle. I mentioned this to you in our sort of email exchange prior to, like, and it's something that I would like to continue. I saw a thing not that long ago. I don't know where I even saw it, with Laura Catena talking about moderation. And I certainly think that's something this industry, specifically, just speaking from a journalistic point of view, needs to have serious conversations about. And so, like, I went through this period in spring where I was in the UK for Decanter's Day. Then I was in Sicily, and I was back in the UK. Then I was in our New York event, and then I went to the Mosel. And I just, like, in addition to being like a sort of an amateur athlete, I'm vain, and I was like, man, you don't look so hot, brother, and you don't feel great either. And so I really needed to sort of, take stock of that. And it's grueling, but I think it's the job, and figuring out what I need. What I was doing at first, you get all these wines that you have to taste, right? And you're like, wow, these are delicious wines. These are amazing wines. I can't believe I get access to get to taste all these wines. I want to drink these wines too. And so, you keep to my neighbors on my street. So what I do is I taste through about midday. I send out a text to my neighborhood, and it's got a picture of all the bottles. These will be on the, and then needless to say, I have any problems with my neighbors. But and I used to say, like, okay, I'm going to keep a couple bottles and drink them with dinner, and I just don't do that anymore. I try to drink 2 nights a week, maybe 3. And I really had to, I'm not, if I was 28, I'm 48, and in a month I'll be 49, and maybe I just can't get away with the things I used to get away with. So it is a concern that I have in our industry, and I think something that more people need to talk about. And so I'm interested in having that conversation as an industry as we sort of move forward.
Yeah, I think it's really important. That all of us, like, whatever, I turned 50 a couple of months ago, that all of us, as we realize we're not 20s anymore, have had to trips. We don't bounce back in the same way. You need to be careful about the things you do and don't do if you want to have longevity in this, and you want to have you want to be good at that side of what you do. Yeah,
and I think, as you know, like, it's not just the wine. There's a as a journalist, you're hosted and you're fed these multiple course meals, and you're going to the next place, and it's the same, and so it's really like this lifestyle that. And I used to, when I was at my former job at the university, like anything you do can become more than a job, and certainly you're an example of someone who's very passionate about. You would not say that what you do is just a job. Like, you're very, you're a spokesperson for the Rhone varietals in the U.S., for Paso worldwide, for regenerative agriculture, all these things. You're obviously deeply passionate, and I care a lot about wine too. But also, I just say, I sort of have this mantra where I'm like, dude, this is a job, not a lifestyle. This is a job, not a lifestyle. You don't need to go ham on all these lunches and dinners, and it's like the human version of foie gras, where you're stuffing yourself with these meals and really trying to think, okay, how can I do this well, enjoy it. I mean, it's ridiculous, the things you get access to and the kinds of things you're invited to do, and you should be grateful for them. But how do you do that and balance, being healthy at the same time? And so that's something it'll be a year. Today's with the 6th, so this job for a year, and so really still trying to figure out, okay, how do I make it all work?
Yep. Cool. Well, actually, so let's dive into that. So I think most people, most American viewers, they're aware of Decanter, they probably think of it as basically a UK magazine. Mm-hmm. But one of the things I thought was really interesting to learn is that a third of the readers of Decanter are in the United States, and so, I mean, that was part of what they talked about in creating kind of the U.S. editor position building out a team to cover the United States. So can you talk a little bit about what kind of your vision is for this kind of American coverage, this American outpost of Decanter?
Yeah, right. It's an outpost. That's definitely the right way to say it. Yeah, I think a few things. So I think you're right. You know, in addition to the amount of U.S. readership, more than half of the online readership is from the U.S. and Decanter is the most trafficked wine website on Al Gore's internet, and so it does have a huge U.S. readership, but it is very it's based in London. It's been around since 1975, almost as long as me, and so it's definitely a sort of legacy traditional brand, but it's also now owned by a company, and it has been for a few years, I guess, called Future, which is a publishing house, they have Marie Claire as an example, and they have a lot of tech and gadget brands. Many of them are just websites, not necessarily print. And they have a keen eye, and this keen is a word they use a lot, so I figure I'll throw that out there, on the American audience. And so I think coming into the U.S. Is important to them. And I was approached, and it's a funny story if you want to hear that at some point, about sort of like what was going on with me at the time when they came to me, and looking for someone who can build out sort of this U.S. program and increase coverage, be not just necessarily surgical, but maybe more methodical in the different kinds of coverage that we're doing. So as you know, likely, and certainly Chris has talked with me about, we haven't done a lot of Paso in years past, and that's changing. We have a Paso vintage report coming up, for example. So that's an example of something that I'm trying to do that's super exciting. I think it adds a lot of value to Decanter's readership, both in the U.S. and also in the U.K. And I think it's interesting about Decanter is they're sort of the English language magazine of record for the rest of the wine world. You know, like the U.S. is where we can always be guilty of, being sort of navel gazing and sort of thinking like, well, all these magazines, they exist everywhere in the same way they do here, and that's not necessarily the case. Whereas Decanter really is that English-speaking voice in Europe and in Asia and in other places. But really adding value to all of those audiences through a more extended, but also more in-depth coverage of regions like your own, the Finger Lakes, Virginia, for example. We did Lauren Mowry did a short vintage report on Virginia, and so that's kind of the approach that I'm taking, is working with my editorial colleagues to figure out what works, working with our overall, Decanter has an events team, it has a sales team, it has IT people, and so on and so forth, all of them based in London. I'm the only person in the U.S. I have two colleagues, I think, who live in France. Our Bordeaux editor, Georgie, is in Bordeaux, and then a colleague, Nerea, she manages our premium outreach. She's somewhere in France. I honestly don't know where. I just talked to her yesterday, but so yeah, that's sort of the approach, is to extend the coverage, to diversify the coverage, both in terms of what we're covering, but also the voices that you are reading in the magazine. That was a goal of mine. When I took over, I was sort of handed a team when I took the role, and sort of been spending this first year really cultivating a team that I think is a team that works well with me. Some of the folks in the original group have moved on to other things, and so really trying to add a diversity of voices as well to the magazine and to the wine world. I think that's a massive area of oversight. Coming from higher education, where I was doing a lot of recruiting and hiring and retaining, and really with an eye on cultivating staff diversity, so that students see themselves in the staff that they're working with. That was one of the first things I noted. It didn't really exist in the wine world, and so it's been interesting, the conversations that I've had, and sort of trying to make progress in that area as well.
Yeah, that's one of the things I wanted to ask you, because I like that is thread that connects the work that you did at the University of Washington and what you're doing now is that, I mean, and I think this is something that the world of wine has maybe come to grips with a little bit more in the last few years, that like the people who write about wine do not look like the American populace more generally.
Right. Yeah.
And that I think is one of the barriers that keeps wine from being adopted more broadly and keeps more people from becoming engaged with it. So it sounds like you're thinking very kind of consciously about that.
Yeah. I mean, that's just, part of it is a function of just the work that I did for so many years. Is one of the first things I would see, about the context, because it's broader than a place or a place of employment or even a field, a professional field. But it's just different contexts, and I've been asked to do some speaking engagements and things of that nature, and I've gone on trips, and I've been at events, and yeah, it's a very white. It's sort of a monoculture at the sort of gatekeepering level, and so I think the industry, from making it, selling it, promoting it, writing about it, really needs to get serious about, sort of from an awareness point of view, and then what are the next steps, once you have an awareness. Sometimes awareness does, and so that's part of the first thing you have to do, is get people to a place where this is an issue about, inclusion, but also, like you said, who's drinking the wines, and do they see themselves on the panels when they go to these seminars, or there's a lot of events for consumers. But if the consumers, who are people of color, only see themselves in the audience and never see themselves in the panel, or don't see themselves in the mastheads in the magazines, or in the winemaking world, people aren't going to feel like it's for them. And so I think that's just an important part of how you go about making a difference and making change over time. And it's certainly going to take time. But higher education is on a much faster track than most industries when it comes to this. And so I think I was fortunate to come from that industry.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. So you've been pretty immersed in Washington wine for a long time, living there and the blog we're doing. Is there like a stereotype about Washington wine you'd like to dispel, or what for people?
Yeah.
And obviously a lot of people who are down here in California, like they see a handful of Washington wines in grocery stores, but they probably don't know
Right.
diversity. What would you want people to know about Washington wine from your experience up there?
Yeah, I mean, I think a couple things. I mean, one of the things, it's sort of a blessing and a curse for the state of Washington, is that, California is a tremendously diverse place, but it was fortunate, and I believe this, and maybe you might see it differently as a winemaker and it was fortunate that it got started with a sort of flag in the ground around Cabernet, and people around the world came to realize some of the great Cabernets in the world come from California. Therefore, California is a serious place that we should pay attention to. Oregon, through the Willamette Valley, had the same sort of experience with Pinot Noir, flag in the ground. This is one of the best Pinot Noir producing regions in the world. People will say that in Burgundy. Oregon makes world-class Pinot Noir. And so people start paying attention. Washington, on the other hand, has had variety from the beginning. And so I think that has in some way cursed their ability to become known for one specific thing. What that means then for the consumers, though, is loyalty to Washington wine within the state. You see it in Seattle. You see restaurants that some of which have only Washington wine lists. You know what I mean? And so I guess I would say to someone from California, just like a lot of places, and I think, unless you're in certain wine shops, it's even true about California, where the best wines don't always make it out of the region in a mass sort of distribution way. Like you said in your example, they see a handful of wines in the grocery stores. Most of them probably say or are a byproduct of Chateau Saint Michel, because they have that sort of size and distribution ability. But there's a lot of really great niche producers who are making high-end Cabernets. The Syrah from the state of Washington is just fantastic and something that people should seek out. And there are producers and newer producers who are making fresher, brighter wines. A state like Washington, or even sometimes a state like California, even though there's so much of it being made there along the Sonoma coast and Sonoma in Santa Barbara County. And there's a great diversity of varieties. And there's a great diversity of styles. And I would say, like who wants to learn more about a place is to just find a really well curated wine shop, and that's the person who's probably going to be best suited to order some wines for you or get their hands on some wines from you that they know you'll like.
It sounds like same kind of like double-edged sword of not being known for a specific thing, as we have down in Paso. I mean, Paso, I would guess, probably follows a fairly similar varietal breakdown as Washington State, in that there's more Cabernet than anything else, but there's also great nexus of brown varieties here, Zinfandel, Italian, lots of things that you can do. And like I have debates often with friends, neighbors, colleagues about whether it would be good for Paso to try to throw its weight behind a particular category or particular subset. And given that like 49% or something of the acres in Paso are planted to cab, like that sounds great to the cab producers. Doesn't sound quite so good to somebody like me who, I would love us to love Paso known for Rhones, even though it's only 20% of the acreage here. So I don't know. It's the curse and the lure of that diversity in styles. It's like it's not easy to categorize sometimes.
Yeah, and I think it's a function also of like Paso in its current state, just like Washington's current state, developed when American wine had sort of already become established, and so there was this fast tracking ability to know exactly what grapes are going to do well in the region. You didn't start with like sort of in the Willamette Valley, or I don't know as much about Napa, about how you landed on a varietal that became I'd say Chardonnay probably and Cabernet became famous at the same time in Napa Valley worldwide. But yeah, I think with Paso or with Washington, these other places, if you can make it all, why not? People are saying like, well, we have all this variety in our tasting rooms, in our SKUs, and it's hard to put the genie back in the bottle. You know what I mean? After it's been let out, and so I think it's tough then for a winery or a wine region rather to become known for something specific because it's interesting to hear you talk about Cabernet. I don't think about Cabernet at all when I think of Paso. I think of Grenache and Syrah and blends and Rhone style blends and some of the white Rhone varieties as well. But that's not surprising because we know that Cabernet is king in most places. It's always going to be the most planted acreage.
Yeah, it's interesting. If you look at Paso, there are actually more producers of Rhone varieties than there are Bordeaux varieties. But it's just all of the billion case producers in Paso.
Yeah, it's a volume game.
The average Paso winery may be a Rhone producer, but the average Paso is cab.
Interesting. That's really interesting. Yeah, I mean that was even my misinterpretation of it as well.
Well,
so
sorry for correcting it. It did that.
No, that's good.
Okay, so I try to keep these to half an hour. I can't believe that it has been half an hour.
Is it already half an hour?
I could, but I did want to finish by sort of saying, like, do you have things coming up in your work with Decanter or anything else that, like, you can give a little preview of, or sort of what you're thinking about next?
Yeah, there's There's a lot of exciting stuff. My Willamette Valley Vintage Report just came out the end of August. That's out there in the wind. Get yourself a premium subscription and check that out. I sort of mentioned earlier in our conversation that we have Brianne Cohen, who's down in Los Angeles, has spent some time in Paso and is writing and is putting sort of the final touches now on a Paso vintage report. We're super excited about that. That'll be out in the November issue, and so that's exciting. It'll be in print. It'll also be in the Napa vintage report. That issue hit stands and premium apps today. That's Jonathan Cristaldi down. He's our Napa. So I mean, it's just and I'm working on the Washington 2020 vintage report, which will come out online in October. Anna's asking when is the Napa report coming out. The magazines, it's available in PDF today if you go online, but it'll be available on the website with all the extended sort of trappings next week. So that's the timeline for that. So yeah, there's a lot going on. I'm also writing a profile on Willie Schaefer, the Mosel producer. So because I was over in the Mosel Valley, I'm excited about that. We have some good content from the West Coast. I need to get some more New York stuff back in the hopper. I really do enjoy the wines out of New York, the Finger Lakes and Long Island especially, but I think they have some great stuff in the Hudson Valley as well, and there's other regions I haven't tasted as much. So I think there's a lot going on, and it's from a full-time point of view, it's just me, and so really working with people like Jonathan in Napa. We got Janae Gaither in Sonoma, and then sort of other folks more of on a freelance basis. But I think it's exciting. There's a lot of talented wine writers in the U.S. and getting to work with them, and it has been fun. So yeah, it's a good time. It's funny. I was watching your interview with Pauline, and she's like, "Oh, I can't believe it's 30 minutes." I was like, "Oh, she's just hamming it up," and I'm like, "Literally, it feel like we've been talking for 5 minutes. That's crazy."
Awesome, cool. Follow you. I mean, obviously, you have this handle on Instagram. Are there other ways that people should follow what you're working on?
Just hearing on so this is also like a lot of cycling stuff and travel stuff, but my LinkedIn page is just my name if you want to look for that. It's more wine centric, and then but this could be like cold plunges in the Puget Sound, which I need to get back on the wagon for that. Bike racing season is right around the corner, as I mentioned, so it'll be a lot of that. So if you want some variety, this is I just I don't like the politics of how that's all gone down, so I got out of there. But yeah, this is kind of it.
Awesome. And of course, Decanter.com, and definitely get
follow all the Decanter accounts, Instagram, face page, whatever, all the different book snap, all those things are important. So
awesome. Cool. Well, Clive, thank you so much for taking a chunk out of your Wednesday afternoon.
Sure.
To story and to share what you're working on. I think it's super exciting. I'm grateful that Decanter made the investment in their American coverage, and excited to see what all comes of it.
Yeah, you and me both, and thanks for all the good work you're doing down there. And I got to taste some of your wines. Just elegance in those wines that you're making, and I look forward to continuing to taste them. Hopefully, we meet again. We meet in person at some point.
I look forward to it.
All right, take it easy.
Thanks, Clive, and thanks everybody, all Tablas Creek fans and Clive's fans who've joined us for this conversation. I'll be back in 2 weeks. I didn't realize that I'm doing a little focus on the Pacific Northwest, but I am. My guest in 2 weeks is going to be Morgan McLaughlin, who is the head of the Willamette Valley Vineyards Association. So we'll get to
She's a good one.
So
yeah.
Thanks, Clive. Thanks, everybody.
Yep. Bye.